Hello, welcome to Q&A 45 on how I began my career. First, I have to excuse all the voices that you may hear because I am currently above a laneway, and by the sounds of the voices, you can even hear some of their conversations. You might notice that I'm in Australia. So if we lean in onto some conversations that are not appropriate, please excuse me. Do you think they can hear us? Today's Q&A is on how I began, and I chose this particular topic because this is where I began, Sydney. I'm currently in Sydney, and Sydney, Australia is where I began my dom journey. And many, many years ago, some of you know this story, but I heard the word dominatrix because somebody, a partner of mine at the time, suggested that it would be a good pathway for me, that I would make a good one because of how assertive I was in my direction. But it was a joke that I lodged away, and when I wanted a shift of careers, I dragged it back up and I thought I would look into this, even though I didn't have so much of a reference point as to what it was all about. And if you have any questions about the beginning of my career, please feel free to put them there in the little question button that's down the bottom. Otherwise, I'm not going to be seeing your comments. And if you have anything that's not Instagram appropriate to say in the comments or in the questions, you will be blocked and I will enjoy it. So here we go. Okay. Let's see. How did you manage expectations of being a pro with being new and technically unskilled? So when I began, I didn't actually begin in the lifestyle space at all. I went directly to professional, and I answered an ad to go to a specific venue that housed 20 plus people who were practicing this particular job. And I learned on the job, kind of like an apprenticeship. That's exactly what they called it. They called it an apprenticeship. And how did I manage expectations? I think everybody that was coming to that particular venue understood that I was a new person. And if I didn't feel confident in something, I also felt very comfortable saying so and asking for the advice or the presence of another dom that was in the building. Somebody to kind of show me what it was, and then I could kind of take it from there. So that was the format that was set up within that specific space, and that's kind of what I rolled with, and that's been very helpful in terms of being honest with myself in terms of my limitations and asking for guidance from multiple sources so as to get the better understanding of where you're going to sit in things. So I think it's mostly about not being too hard on yourself and understanding that there will always be gaps. And so being a pro with being technically unskilled, it's just a matter of time and experience, isn't it? All right. So I think a lot of these questions are definitely coming from people who are interested in working as well. So I'm going to try to choose something that's a little bit more general. What have been the biggest challenges or changes in your career from when you started to now? My rate. And I think I've always had an ease about me because I was comfortable understanding, that I didn't have to be completely competent. But in terms of the biggest changes, I would say the rate and definitely the way that I market shifts a little bit all the time, even now. And maybe the largest change is that I have a community around me, which even though I did start in a house that had 20 over people, I didn't understand that was also a family of sorts, and I saw them as my colleagues, which they were, and I didn't lean on them for personal development. It was more all professional. And so I think the fact that I now have reached out to a community privately really helps me measure my job, measure my life, my headspace in terms of how everything goes. And therefore I can innovate, I can create, I can run things in a more efficient manner because I'm just a little bit more stable because of that. Oh, okay. Ever have any doubts about your career? How did you forge through it if you did? I think on my own, I'm quite an open-minded person. And so I didn't have any doubts until I met somebody who I thought, whose opinion that I trusted. And they, not at the beginning, but very like gradually started to say, how could this be an option for you? How could you have made this choice? It was an ex-partner of mine. And so those thoughts combined with the fact that I thought I could trust them and that I thought that they were accepting of me, it kind of messed with me for a little while. And so I actually stopped. I stopped working for about a year. And how did I forge through? I think a part of me understood that there was nothing wrong with it as long as I was consenting and it was an environment that was consensual, and especially the sex work aspect of it. And how did I forge through? I took that break. I went back to school. I did a social work diploma because I can't do burnout quietly, it seems. And when my internship came through, I chose a sex work organization. And I think probably subconsciously I understood that I needed to be exposed to narratives that were more informed. And so I did that. And that, I guess, gave me the strength to slowly come back to things and to see how it could fit and work for me. And obviously I got rid of that partner. So I think informing oneself, surrounding yourself in a way that you feel supported. And yeah, and that was maybe about 6 years ago. And I started maybe 11 years ago. So, I think it does happen to a lot of us. How did you know how to talk to your first clients to build the right atmosphere? So I come from a very varied background. I was doing research work prior to this job, and so I spoke to a lot of people on a regular basis, and I understood how to ask questions to get at least a range of answers that I was hoping for. And so I think I definitely brought a lot of that into it. But to create an atmosphere, I think it's also something that you can gain depending on the people that you're around. I think I have a family that is very good at reading a room and creating a supportive environment for it. And so when you have those kinds of skills, you can apply them. But in terms of an atmosphere that's correct, it's really up to you. I mean, if you want to make it feel nurturing and supportive, that's one thing. If you want to make it feel laced with terror, that's another thing. And I think that probably actors can tell you better exercises to get there. But for me, this craft is a very emotionally honest one. And I don't go in thinking, I want them to feel like this and I want to feel like that. I walk in feeling how I am, and they inspire how I continue to feel. And that is the exchange. It's kind of an authentic exchange. And I guess I'm lucky in that I tend to prefer intense exchanges that are within a power dynamic anyway. And so that kind of feeds into what I do. I'm doing what I think I was supposed to be doing. So that probably really helps. Okay. Knowing what you know now, what is the one thing you would change about your Tom journey? I think that I would surround myself with others who were successfully practicing my job earlier. And I mean, I know that sounds ridiculous because I was in the house with people who had been doing it 15, 20 years, and they were amazing role models. But once I lost that particular house, because they did close, they were open for about 40 years, which is a long time. I wasn't even that old back then, but they closed, and I went off on my own and I started traveling, and I didn't socialize with people who were doing what I do. And I think that is when I was a little bit out on my own, and I had to kind of figure out my space in the world, and that leaves you open to a lot of society's prejudices. And without enough information and enough support, it's really not going to be an easy ride for you. So I think that would probably be the one thing that I would change. What are the three most important things that you did to attract new clients, and do you still do them? So at the very beginning, I was in a house. So they all came to us, and it was a venue. Everybody knew about it. It was a destination. It was on. Did we have Google Maps back then? Probably, right? It was a very yellow. We had white pages back then here. It was on white pages. And so it was a known place, and they came to me, and there was a reputation, and I guess there was a trust, right? And so I didn't do so much. I kind of was just being present. I found a spot that seemed reputable. I dug my heels in and learned what I could, and I was always honest with the clients in my limitations. So I guess those were the three things that I did then. Are they still the same? I guess I've built up a reputation, so I guess I've internalized a lot of those things more than anything else. But I think that hasn't necessarily changed. What do I do mostly now? Now, I mean, back then I didn't really have so much of an awareness of what kind of style I like to play in, what specific things that I was interested in indulging in, and what kind of relationships I wanted to build, what kind of potential clients there were. And so I think that has informed me in order to do my marketing more pointedly, and in order for me to see an application and feel like, oh, that's going to be a good fit, or to be like, no, or to spot the people who are worth hanging on to and to let those go who are not going to be a good fit. So I think those are maybe the most important things around clients right now in terms of finding new ones. Okay. So there's talk of us raising rates as workers. If you don't mind sharing, what was my first per hour rate as a new sex worker? So when I first began in the house, the lowest rate was $150 Australian dollars for half an hour of foot worship, from memory. And the house would get 40 and I would get 60%. So, double digits. But there wasn't a per hour rate. It was per content in that specific setting. When I left the house, I used my escort rate for my dom work, and that was 700 Australian dollars per hour, which was double already what that rate was. Now it's around 1,000 US an hour. So yeah, it's actually, it's raised, and then I kind of do a 2.5 minimum, then a 5 and a 10 for the whole day. That's kind of my scale now. So it's changed a lot. I might throw in a coffee for much less every now and then, but in general, that's there's been a hell of a progression. Maybe I'll talk about that later or in another way. What is something unexpected that came from starting this incredible journey? Something unexpected. For better or for worse, I tend not to do things with a specific outcome in mind if I am not a little bit familiar or have a very particular wider ranging goal. So unexpected is always expected. But I would say that I didn't think it would be so educational. I didn't understand the extent as to how much society shuns people who are comfortable with themselves and their sexuality, and especially those who are ready to play in a capitalist environment with that. And so I think that it's been very educational in terms of understanding why, and then being able to do things that can support the shift of that in better ways. So I didn't think that I would be learning so much in that sense of things. I think also I didn't realize how much fun I would be having but I already understood that on the very first day because of my first session and how happy I was. I never felt as happy. I'd never looked as happy. So that was a very quick realization, and that hasn't changed, which is very nice. If you could go back to when you started, what advice would you give yourself when you were just starting out? I think I did all right. But I've had a lot of different jobs in my life, and I've been very good at observation and keeping my mouth shut at the beginning at least, and learning as much as I could. So I'd say just do more of that, because that is really what helped me figure out what I enjoyed, what my place could be, what was worth following or not. So I think just a continuation of that. I don't know if I would do anything differently. Maybe one thing would be to have financial goals a little bit sooner. Maybe not immediately, but soon after might have been smart, because I feel fine now, but it could have been finer. Yeah. How did you first embody the dominant mindset? As in, what action did you take? Now, this is my personality. I didn't take any particular action. I have always, since I was tiny, had a good grasp of scenarios around me and been interested in getting what I wanted. and not budging too easily from that. And so I think those character traits tend to put you in a space where you are going to find it more enjoyable to stand in a dominant stance. And so I didn't have to do much practice around that. But I usually say to those who are interested, who are not comfortable or familiar, to start to ask things of the people around you who you trust, or even set aside some time to ask for those particular things, and flex that muscle a little bit. Yeah. Let's see. Lots of really good questions. Thank you for being so engaged into this one. Did you have specific activities that you enjoyed the most earlier in your career that you have changed? No, I would say that things have just developed upon themselves. One thing that I didn't know how much I would enjoy is probably heavy. I'm not sure if I can say the word. It starts with B, ends in itch. And but like heavy leather restraints, like full coverage. I didn't know that existed, and that is quite a large part of my practice now, and I didn't know about it back then. I just knew about the light restraints, obviously, I guess, because when you're just beginning against this surface or against that, not about suspension, not about full body encasement suspension. And so that's probably been the biggest change. But the specific activities that I started off in the beginning, the feet, the humiliation, these things have carried on and really come into themselves. Yeah, I still enjoy it a lot, clearly. Did you have a mentor? I was lucky. If you've been listening, I was very lucky in that I had 25 mentors in that space when I first started in the dungeon. And so that's a lot of learning that can be done just by sitting in the waiting room and listening to people even. Not that, many of them were that friendly or would have said they were my mentor, but I think I learned something from everyone there. especially the receptionists. And our headmistress Amanda was very kind to set up things for me, to set up workshops for me, and even to help me in sessions sometimes. So that was a real honor. And actually, I have a little bit of a system that I'm trying to work with right now. So I have a lot of peers who I run things by and really appreciate their support and their input. We kind of do that for each other. I have some younger DOMs who are up and coming who I also kind of treat in that way and try to keep things fresh. But I am currently looking for somebody who is much further along in their career. It tends to be difficult around this mark because people tend to disappear around the 7-year mark or so. Not many people make it to over a decade like I do. I mean, you do have the incredible elders of the scene, but I'm not sure if I'm necessarily looking for somebody who's strictly a dom. Maybe somebody more in like the business space that's familiar with sexuality, but I would like to think about that actually. So growth is possible if you feel like it. When and how did you disclose? There's 2 parts to this question. How did you disclose? And when I say disclose, I mean disclose your profession to people in your life. So pretty quickly, I was very happy to tell friends about my dom work, but not my escort work. And I would say that I lost quite a few, even just on the dom front. And it took me 7 years to tell my family. Yeah, I realized that not telling my family was really a big limitation for me, and I was ready to accept the consequences of potentially being cut off from them, disowned, so to speak. But luckily, they were very engaged with asking me questions and finding out whether I was all right, whether I was like what the job was all about, and whether it nourished me or not. And so I realized that I could have probably told them a little sooner. But yeah, the journey around that is interesting. And even these days, I am very open, as you can see. But I am still a little cautious with certain minds if I see that they're going to be hesitant or violent about it. Or if it's simply, a legal issue, then I do tend to be a little bit more discreet about things. But for the most part, I understand that when people have a rough reaction to this, it's very much about them and their understanding. And yeah, there's ways around informing them so that they feel better about themselves and therefore what I do. But do I have time and interest in that? Only with some. Thank you for these great questions. I really appreciate them. There's so many. How old was I when I started? I was 26, 25, 26. I'm not anymore. Let's see. Oh, okay. So this kind of goes off of the previous question. Were you worried about the stigma aspect? How did you deal with it when confronted with stigma? Was I worried about the stigma aspect? Not when I started. After I started to realize that it was going to be an issue. Ignorance on my part. How did I deal with it when confronted with it? Because a lot of the people who were saying crap to me were who I thought were my friends. I took it in because I'm that kind of person. I'm like, all right, what does that mean? Why does it, let me figure that out. Let us figure this out. But when people don't want to shift their minds because they are stuck in something and they don't want to move past their limitations, then you need to let them go. And there's some people who I've been with for a very long time, like people who I've known for 20 years, and they've had their different grapples with it. I've tried to find other ways to connect with them and sort of let them see what my life looked like. And after some time, when they see how well I'm doing, when they see the things that I'm saying, and they see the friends around me who are strong people who are changing the worlds around them for the better, then they tend to shift. So it depends how much you want to invest and whether people are worth it. Some are, some are not. and I've cut the ones who I felt were really not going to shift or not that interesting to me anyway. And I've given the ones who are closer to me a little bit more time to observe. And if they are people who I've chosen to give that time to, then I think on a level they're definitely worth it. And so there's ways about it, I guess is what I'm saying. So how did you get into it at the very start, then transition to charging for your work? So I went straight to pro, as I've mentioned already on here, but I let the house dictate these things. So if you're lucky enough to have a reputable house that you can work with, they have a structure and you go in and you learn their structure, and if you want to change it for yourself and when you leave them, then so be it. But that was a lucky thing for me. I think if you're starting completely independently, I think it's still good to do some market research and to just surround yourself with people who are doing that, and it inspires you, it informs you. Where was your first pro session? Salon Kitties, the dungeon where I began, which is in Sydney, which is why I've done this. If you watched the whole thing, thank you very much. Okay. Did you use social media for your dom career? Any tips on making it without? This is from somebody who wants to be private about it. There's a second part to this question. But when I didn't have social media for the first 8 years of my career. Was social media as big a thing? Facebook was a thing. Instagram was slowly becoming a thing. There was no TikTok, which I have an account, but I have nothing on it. Please school me. But so social media for my dom career was not something that I thought was necessary. When I thought it would be necessary is when I had an online product. So I had a website, which I still have, that people can sign up to. And I thought, okay, a presence is going to be necessary so that people can get familiar and join me that way. This was a marketing route. Would I say that it's necessary? I know some people who don't indulge in it, who mostly use listing sites, but those listing sites are fewer than they used to be. And I don't think I can mention them on here, but there are some that starts with an E, ends with an S, that keep your ID and have turned it over to governments and things like this. So you got to be careful about how you're listing these days. But if you're only doing real time and you're not going to think so much about online products, perhaps there's a way. But of course it will be limited because it is a language that people speak in these days so much, right? Do I have anything else to say on that? No, not right now. I hope that was helpful. What is it like to date or have romantic relationships while being a dominatrix? I actually did a whole little Q&A on this for Vice UK. If you go to Vice UK on Instagram, I think I'm still one of their highlights. So I'm going to point you there instead of use all our time here. Let's see. So some of these are doubling up. Some of these are very inappropriate. Some of these are asking things that I've already answered. So please go back and listen to everything. I'm going to pop this up on my wall. And some people asking how to meet me, which we cannot speak about on here. Okay, so there we've got this. Maybe we have one or two more questions that are going to be answered. So when was the first time you heard anything remotely close to this lifestyle that you lead? And also, how did it feel to have, how did it feel to have the power over someone for the first time? So the first time that I heard anything about it, I think that in popular culture, sorry if it's getting a bit dark, the light's not working for some reason. I've just sort of aware of it in popular culture. Maybe there was a character here and there, but in the 90s, early 2000s, there wasn't as much saturation of accessible media as there is now, and definitely not around open sexuality. And so it was a very, very not a very strong picture of what a dominatrix was. However, that being said, I had a little tiny image. And then when my partner mentioned it, I stored away that reference. So when I actually started in the dungeon, I really didn't have much of a clue. I went to my interview, and at the interview they were like, "Sure, you can start. We won't really know until you start." And I said, "Okay, help. I need to be schooled a little bit more. Do you have any recommendations? What are some reading that I can do?" And Headmistress Amanda was amazing and gave me a reading list and gave me a list of places that I could go and check out in terms of clothes. Told me what to like buy as a basic outfit for the first few days and what kind of makeup to wear. And yeah, and so I read Different Loving by Gloria, I can't remember the full name, I think two contributors, writers. And that was very informative. And I think SM 101 also. And what a newbie. And yeah, with all of those two books, I like smashed them in a couple of days and went in and just sat and observed and took my time in learning. So I didn't hear much, did I? I just kind of went for it. How did it feel the first time to have that power? I mean, I've always had the power, but to be in a forum that is very interested in it and is very engaged with it, that was a huge rush, and it still is. I mean, that's why I live the lifestyle. I'm a sucker for the rush like everyone else. And there was one more question, and I think that's it for me today. Okay, yeah. Let's scroll down to the bottom if anybody added anything new. No. So, not sure if I can pull this one up too easily, but I will do it anyway. Suggestions for other workers who would like to learn more about this role or work. Well, you're in the right place. I would say definitely expose yourself to as many types of workers doing what I do as possible. Get a sense of what is possible. Maybe try to shadow them in their work if they offer that. I don't. But there are many who do. Maybe take a course from a reputable one. I would say the one that I find most reputable right now might be one that I've heard of in LA by, what is her name right now? It escapes me. But she's been around for a very long time. An Asian mistress, Damiana Chi. Yeah. I think she might do some online ones also. I've heard very good things about her course, it being a very thorough and researched one. So I would say inform yourself, and get your hands dirty. Yeah. And surround yourself by those who inspire you and who you can also support. So, if you don't have any other questions, I am going to go, and I will see you next time. Goodbye from Sydney. I'll probably next be logging on from Tokyo, and I will be in quite a few other cities after that. You'll see it all in my bio, and so maybe I'll see some of you there. Thank you.